For me, sports and competition has always been kind of a sanctuary where I'm able to, really tune out the rest of the stuff going on in my life and compartmentalize and focus on the game. It's always been a place where I can kind of escape the rest of reality and get into kind of a zone and enjoy. I'm a big time competitor. I want to win at everything. So fully entrenched in that moment and the hard stuff that's going on, I'm able to move away from that for a few hours and grateful for that.
Welcome to another episode of the Hey Where'd You Go podcast. I'm your host, Collin Kushner. Joining me now is former Boise State Broncos quarterback, Jared Zabransky. Jared, what's going on, brother?
Hey, man, just waiting for this to happen. It's been a busy day today with work, but it's a great way to cap it off.
Well, hey, I appreciate you taking the time. I grew up watching you over at Boise State, so this is truly an honor to have you here on the podcast. And usually with my guests, I like to start from the very beginning and kind of weave to where we are now. You grew up on a farm in Hermiston, Oregon, which is near the Washington State border. What was it like growing up on a farm?
Your summers were definitely busy. There was from about the age of 6, that was the first summer that I got called to duty. It was really early morning, as I recall, earlier than I was used to waking up, especially the first few weeks of summer. Our harvest season usually started end of July, early August. I just remember my mom coming in the room saying, "Hey, it's time to get up." And the sun hadn't been up yet. And it was quite shocking. You literally were working from sun up to sundown. And it was, when harvest starts on a farm, it doesn't stop. So you're harvesting that field or that crop all the way through from the age of 6 to 17 or so. I think that was my last summer. We were primarily potatoes. There were some melons in there, but it was primarily potatoes. So that's that late July to about mid-August. We would usually be harvesting for 2 to 3 weeks at minimum. So it was 5 a.m. wake up to last truck being loaded and sent off about 6 p.m. So you're 12, 13-hour days, which it's a shock for a little guy, but you get used to it, and that work ethic gets ingrained in you at a pretty early age, which I'm extremely grateful for.
When did you get your start into football? You're growing up on the farm and you're working those crazy hours. How does football factor into your life growing up?
Those are kind of spring breaks and summer. So everything around those time, I was living in Hermiston, as you mentioned, was close to the Oregon-Washington border there. It was like along the Columbia River bed. There wasn't a ton to do. Sports were a pretty big part of the community. My family, pretty big extended family, we all played sports. Out of my 34 first cousins, 9 of us played Division I athletics, and there wasn't really a whole lot else going on in the area. So I found a lot of time to play sports. I played football and basketball and baseball growing up, and did that all the way through, and was fortunate to have some success.
At what point did you decide to focus on football? Was there like a certain point you remember where you're like, this is the sport that I want to continue to perfect and potentially play at the next level?
I had some success in all of them. I was an all-state point guard and an all-state shortstop. I didn't get any state recognition in football. And I had 3 coaches that were really, really good high school coaches. I mean, all 3 of them really were. cared about their student athlete. They cared about me. I've stayed in touch with all of them. They're just great men, and they all brought me in and said, "Jared, what do you want to do?" Because I think they believed that I could pursue any of the sports, but they asked me truly what I wanted to do in athletics. And I told them I want to be a professional athlete. And to me, I didn't care which sport. I loved all three of them. Basketball was probably my favorite. They said, well, if you really, really want to be a professional athlete, the probability is best suited for you to follow football. It's probably the easiest sport to make for a 6'2", 6'3", 185-pound, I think I was at the time, white kid from Oregon. So I got, and that was my junior year, and we went to some football camps. My junior summer, I went to the Boise State camp and got some recognition there. And then the coaches continued to follow me, and had a really good senior year. We won our first conference championship in the history of school. Boise State and Idaho, the University of Purdue, Northwestern, and a couple Ivy League schools, Pennsylvania University, and Harvard showed some interest. I talked to all of those coaches, whether it was via phone call or letters, and I had a ton of interest, just a general interest. Hey, kid, fill this sheet out. So I was getting a bunch of different letters from every school, which was pretty neat. But I think I landed in the right place.
When you're a small town guy, and you have, tons of interest from Division I programs all over the country, was it overwhelming for you? Was it fun and exciting? Was it kind of a little bit of everything? How'd you navigate that? Because I think now with the way social media is, my head explodes just listening to these stories. And so I'm curious what that was like for you.
Well, it was very different back then. And it was new for my parents. It was first for our family. The recruiting process was fairly simple, formal invites to go to campus and meet with the coaches. And so that was kind of a neat process for my parents and I to experience. It was really my mom and I. My dad was still kind of recovering from an illness that he had dealt with. So it was a fun experience. It was actually fairly simple for us to decide. Did have interest from several schools, but all of them outside of the University of Idaho and Boise State were either asking me to retake my SATs, whether that was Penn or Harvard, or telling me that I had preferred walk-ons. So the only two schools that offered me a full ride scholarship were Boise State and University of Idaho. And the programs were kind of shifting, and you could feel that and see that. Boise State had been at that time, 2001, 2002, a Division 1A school for about a decade, and Idaho was really on the back end of their success. And the coaches were great, and they did a good job of recruiting me. Felt like they were honest, and you really could. You took a little bit deeper look into the program, and you can kind of see the shift in the direction.
I kind of want to take a few steps back. I remember you had mentioned to me that your dad came down with West Nile virus, I think while you were in high school. Like, how did that impact you, and how did you navigate that time at such a young age?
Yeah, it was a weird deal. It was a really weird deal because we didn't know what it was for several weeks. And I just remember him being at home and having an extreme headache, and my mom would get him a cold towel, and that was before internet was super prevalent, but you could still get on there and the World Wide Web and do some searching. So I remember my mom and sister just kind of doing the WebMD thing and trying to diagnose and find out what was going on. And we thought for a while maybe it was a bird flu or some sort of meningitis. So he was really sick for about 2 weeks at the house, and then got admitted to the hospital in Hermiston, and we found out real quickly that they couldn't care for him the way that he needed, so they moved him to Sacred Heart in Spokane, and that was where some of our families, like his sisters and my aunt's families lived. So it was close to family. He was in the hospital for about 6 months. He lost about 100 pounds. He was in intensive care for about 6 weeks, and he was in a medically induced coma for several days. And we remember there was a specific time I remember going and visiting that chances of him surviving were really, really slim. Thank God that he was able to pull out of that, but the process thereafter has been really a 20-year kind of remnant struggle with the effects of West Nile throughout that process of not understanding what he had. I remember him being given and administered a bunch of different medications, and we assumed that administration of all those different medications and along with West Nile have led to diabetes that he's dealt with for about 20 years now, which at his age and his health condition has been really hard on him. So it was tough, man. 17 years old, I was at home, finishing my spring semester and baseball at the time. The first part of summer, I was at home. So you can imagine a 17-year-old kid not making the best decisions when he has a big farmhouse for the summer. I remember my brother coming home a couple of times and being like, "What are you doing, man?" Oh, and all my siblings are much older than I am. My brother's 10 years older. But you live and you learn, and thank God that he was able to pull through that illness. Just very grateful that we still got him today.
How did your perspective shift? Because when you're 17 years old, like you talked about, we have decisions, we throw parties, or we're doing what we're supposed to do at that age. But when a loved one gets really ill, like how did that change your perspective at such a young age about life?
You're forced to do more things than more of a responsibility set. Even though I wasn't acting completely responsible at times, you really do. There's more things for me to take care of. There's more things to be aware of. And I think looking back on it today, I'll be very grateful to have my father. But the people that, the rest of my family and the people that surrounded that situation, illness, supported our family. You're just grateful for family and friends, and it gives you a new perspective, a newfound gratitude for your loved ones and for life, a new appreciation for how fragile this thing we call life is on Earth. So I think I look back on it now. With a different lens, but as you're in it, you just kind of try to put one foot in front of the other and not get too lost in the different things that are thrown at you.
Putting one foot in front of the other is key. I mean, it's the most cliche thing. It's like coach speak in a way, but it's the most true thing that you could possibly say, because you don't want to get too far ahead and you don't want to go too far back behind. And so I think that's fantastic that was your approach. And of course, having family and friends around you, because no one can go through something alone. I think a lot of it does come down on you and the choices and the decisions that you make, but it's also being surrounded by good people that maybe will keep you on the straight and narrow. At least that's how it's been for me throughout my life.
Yeah, certainly. Your support group and the close people that truly care about you in life during those difficult times. you feel when you can look back on them after you've moved through them, you definitely can understand how important it is to have that type of people or those type of people around you that truly care about you and want the best for you, and how important a support group like that, whether it's family or chosen family, to have is.
During that time, did everything with your dad, did that elevate your game on the football field, or how did that impact, you going through that process, ultimately committing to play at Boise State?
No, so he was able to see a lot of my senior season. For me, sports and competition has always been kind of a sanctuary, where I'm able to, really tune out the rest of the stuff going on in my life and compartmentalize and focus on the game. Um, and as I'll share probably a little bit later in the podcast, I was able to kind of hone that in to a deeper level, after some struggles. But it's always been a place where I can kind of escape the rest of reality and get into kind of a zone and enjoy. I'm a big time competitor. I want to win at everything. So I get fully entrenched in that moment, and the hard stuff that's going on. I'm able to move away from that for a few hours, and grateful for that.
I like how you called it a sanctuary. I think that's the best way to put it. I grew up playing ice hockey, and I think for those of my friends that didn't play sports, they didn't understand my obsession. And I was a goalie, which was a terrible decision. But it was one of those things where anytime I would step on the ice, it was like everything else around me was just black and dark. And it was like all you could see in front of you were the other guys on the ice and the play in front. And so I always enjoyed that, because whether it was struggling in school or whatever was going on, it went away. And I don't think there's anything else that I've had in my life that could emulate that feeling. So I totally hear you when you call it a sanctuary, because I think it's the special part about sports and committing yourself to the craft.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many layers to sport that there's so many different intrinsic values that come with it, that at the really baseline level, people that don't play sport, or are just fans of, might not get to see or understand the depth of it. But sports is such a great thing. I really truly believe that it teaches. I got both my children playing volleyball and football right now. Football just got over, but it just teaches them so many different things, from teamwork to discipline to self-discipline to reliance on others and accountability. And then it provides that depth of the sanctuary effect.
You arrive on campus at Boise State, and you saw the Smurf turf for the first time. What was the first thing that went through your mind?
Well, so I shared that I went to that camp my junior summer. They had the old turf, and we got to play a couple like mini scrimmages on the old. It was like the old Astro turf, and it was blue, like not the new field turf that they have now, but the Astro turf. Like you wore basketball shoes on. So I remember wearing like some patent leather Jordans, which I thought I was cooler than cool, and getting my elbows all skinned up, man, thinking, man, this turf sucks. And that, and it was it was blue, but it was like almost like it was like a faded blue because the sun had like bleached it. And then when I showed up that following summer, because I reported for like a few weeks, came in and trained with the team. They were putting in the new turf, so like stuff was starting to go down, but there was no blue down yet. And then when we showed up for fall camp, like the week of, it was down, and it was so bright, like bright, and your eyes have to adjust to it. But after a few weeks of practicing on it, you don't even really notice it. But the opposing team sure as hell notices it. because they come in and it's just, one day at a time for a few hours. So they're just seeing all this blue, and we got a ton of blue in the stands. And then, for a decade and a half, it was blue on blue on blue. So we're running around out there, a bunch of Smurfs on blue background. Like it's tough, man. It was tough on opposing teams. I can see it being tough on opposing quarterbacks for sure. It was easy for me to spot out defenders. I look for my reads. Where's the safety at? Where's the flat defender? Where's my interceptor? See them pretty easy most of the time, unless I, was looking in the wrong area. But you see some opposing quarterbacks, man, and they're getting ready to throw it, and they're like, oh, like that ball's coming out of their hand, and their eyes are this big, like, oh, I just saw that guy way too late, and then they're dinking it off of our guy's chest and getting interceptions. So yeah, it was a good place to play. It really was, and it was it was a flat 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks, your eyes adjusted.
I want to talk about the 2006 season. That was Chris Peterson's first year as head coach. You guys go 13-0, and then we're going to fast forward to the 2007 Fiesta Bowl overtime against Oklahoma. What do you remember the most about a particular play in OT?
We had this play, mid-year. We used it against the University of Idaho, and we knew we had something great, and we had statue. We ran it from my freshman year. Ryan Dinwiddie ran it, but it was always, you taking a little drop, you got the ball in both hands, and you're it's almost like a pump fake, like to a double move, or ball fake and then hand it off. It was never the ball handling that we had worked on and that we ran during that play. About halfway through the year, third through the year, Nick Lomax, if you remember that name, it's a football name. Neil Lomax was actually with the Arizona Cardinals as their quarterback for several years. So Nick Lomax was his son, big 6'8" kid from Portland, Oregon. His hands were like this big, and he with the ball one day. He's like, "Hey guys, what if we did this?" And he did the ball handling, like, you just keep it in the left hand, you fake with an empty right. And I remember Harsin, who's the coordinator, who's now the head coach with the University of Auburn. He was like, "Wow, that's pretty good." And Coach Pete seen it, and he was like, "Whoa, I like that." And they looked at me and said, "Z, can you do that?" I was like, "Oh, if Nick can do it, I can do it." So we worked on it, and we ran that play. Collin, I'm not lying. We ran that play 50 times throughout the year in practice. Typically, you run a play twice. You get the scout team 2 times. The third time, they'd see a set, they'd see a motion, and you're running a play that's preparing for that week, and they'd be on it. Pretty smart scout team. That was one of the advantages that we had. Overachievers, pretty intellectual guys. So they'd see it and they'd be like, "Oh, here, the ball's come over here." These guys never figured that play out. We'd get them every. So we knew we had something great. We ran it against the University of Idaho. I think it was week 6 or 7. We'd schemed a formation in a particular personnel formation matchup that we thought Idaho would do with receivers and a tight end backside. And they busted their coverage. They didn't send a corner over. They had a guy kind of fall into it. Well, when we ran it in the game, there's a couple different things that we wanted to do. We were going to run it early in the game, and thank God we didn't call it, but ran some what we call quick screens or wide screens. And the wide screen was where you'd have a 3 receiver set, and then the receiver's account goes from outside in. So the outside receiver is 1, 2, and then 3. Well, 3, your inside receiver would run a little bubble screen. So he'd run a wide and you'd throw it to him. Well, when we would break the huddle with the receivers coming out of the huddle quick, we called it on hurry up. When they'd break the huddle, everybody's eyes on the defense would go, "There's something coming out here to these receivers." Because typically we'd break them out, give the line scrimmage, throw a screen or do something quick. So we didn't have that in that play call, but on the sideline, when we were calling it, we said, "Hey, let's break the huddle quick with hurry up." I said, I coached him up and said, "Hey, we'd seen this earlier in the game." So we schemed it and said, let's get as much attention out there as we can. So sure enough, we get the play call. we knew from the previous possession, Adrian Peterson going one play, 25 yards touchdown, that our defense was soaked. Like they were zapped. They were tired. They'd fought for 4+ quarters, but that was a little telling. And it took us I think it took us 6 plays or 7 plays to get in the end zone. And we had to get in the end zone on a 4th down on a halfback pass, if you remember that. So we were like, hey, we're maxed out. Let's pull out all the stops. So we get up the line of scrimmage or get the play called in the huddle. We break early. And my job at that point was just like it had been all year, was really, and this would have allowed me personally to have the success that I had as a senior, was really focused on the details, not think about the big picture and really, that one foot in front of the other, breaking that down and from a simplification perspective and, thinking about the way that I called the play in the huddle, thinking about how my guys were in the huddle and getting their attention brought into the play, getting the guys on the line of scrimmage and making sure everybody's lined up correctly. Thinking about the way that my cadence sounded and the cadence within my cadence. And then thinking about my drops, as simple as that, thinking about my pre-snap and my post-snap reads, my footwork and how many, steps it takes to throw this route on this side, the same play call concept on the opposite side. Like that's how simplified I kept it all year long. I worked on those, and details were extremely important as they always should be in sport. But that was that play too. That was break the huddle, make sure the play's called correctly. And you call the play correctly. Typically, if you have a guy that's like, huh, right? So you make sure everybody understands what's going on, which we typically did. I mean, we were a bunch of pretty savvy, like I shared with you, our offensive line and core receivers and running backs, a bunch of smart dudes. Break the huddle and get those guys out there quick. And then they run out there and they're like on the line of scrimmage. We got 2 guys on the line of scrimmage. So and my offensive line is like raring and ready to go, right? And I've got 2 guys that are kind of fiddling around the line of scrimmage and Rab's on and Legacy's supposed to get back. So I got to wait for him. I'm like almost up under center. And I'm like, get off the line. And we get set hut, take my steps and make sure, my ball handling is clean. And for me on that call, it was, the ball's getting handed off behind my back. So getting handed off behind my back like this guy.
There we do. That's awesome.
Making sure that I'm holding on to the ball until I feel Ian grab it. So, and his job, he did a great job of selling it, like watching the receivers and then coming back and grabbing the ball. Typically, it's quarterback seating the ball, putting it in the pocket of the running back, and he's up, with his eyes up. So then if you watch that play, I get the ball taken from me and I continue on my drop. And I'm like, yes, we got it. But my foot misses his foot by about this much as we're dropping. Oh, it makes me squirm every time I see it. Like, oh shit, am I going to trip him this time? Like, and he fall, that's like a nightmare. But fortunately it was, I think it's the best play in sports history, but it was pretty cool. Yeah, that's what I remember.
I got to tell you, man, you're making my heart rate and anxiety is like, I feel like I'm back in that moment with you guys in overtime against Oklahoma. My heart's beating a million miles an hour. It's like, and I like what you said though, about the one foot in front of the other approach in terms of breaking it down, as opposed to thinking ahead. Like, is this going to go in? Just, okay, we just broke the huddle. I need to call the play correctly, make sure everyone's set. I kind of love that meticulous, methodical approach that you took. Did you ever question coach like, hey, I don't know if we should do this, or was like, no, I'm with it?
On the 4th and 6 halfback pass, we're on the sideline and he's like, halfback pass. I'm like, are you crazy? I mean, I'm thinking like, I'm a 5th-year senior. If we're gonna throw the ball, let me throw the ball. Like, having and ton of confidence in Vinny to throw it, but thank goodness I think Vinny was um, just inexperienced enough and had enough, like, dude, had brass, man, like had enough just, oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm Vincenzo, like give me the ball, that he didn't see the big, like, it's 4th and 6, this is final play of the game, could be. And he just, spins a perfect ball to the back of the end zone, puts it out there. We sell it just enough. And so on that play, we're on the sideline. I'm like, what are we doing? And then I told him after that, like, I'll never question you again. But on the 2-point conversion on statue, absolutely not. Like, we all knew what we had. We had gold, man. I mean, that play was, we knew it was going to work.
What was that moment like for you after Ian Johnson runs it in? You guys win the ball game. Do you remember that exact moment?
Yeah, pandemonium, man. It was chaos on the field. Our team rushing the field. I remember, Taylor Tharp coming in off the sideline, and he and I are like just excited, jumping up and down. Rest of the team, like, dog piles here and there. Everybody's just going crazy, running around the field. I mean, it was chaos. It was total elation, like the highest of highs that that you could feel in sport.
I think that's probably the greatest play in college football history. I remember watching that game as a kid, and I got faked out. I was like, wait, what? And then I saw, I think it was the bottom left corner, you see Ian Johnson running. I'm like, oh my God. Like, and then obviously they slowed it down for you a couple times. And I'm like, that's freaking rad.
It was pretty cool. And in the moment, the size of that moment, we were considered, it was this storyline and theme was the David versus Goliath theme. And that would have been the placation all week long. And no one really gave us a shot. I mean, outside of our locker room, no one truly believed that we could win that football game. But that was the really unique thing about that team is we got to a place where we didn't care what anybody else thought. And the only thing that was important and was most important is what that locker room truly believed. And we had 100 guys that believed in each other and themselves. And that's a pretty powerful thing. So yeah, it was so many great memories.
After that moment and the dust kind of settled a little bit, you did grace the cover of EA's NCAA football 2008. When you got the call about that, was that just the icing on the cake for you?
It's awesome. So I was actually in Honolulu playing in the Hulu Bowl. It was the first year that they had that come back. It was a senior all-star game. And it was like day 2 out there. And I got a call from a guy named Sandy Sandoval. And he said, hey, we're selecting you to be on the cover. So I had like 6 more days in Honolulu with this news. I mean, it was awesome. And then the whirlwind behind that, the Southern California trip and the Orlando trip, and then the launch during the draft in New York, and the people that were at the party, and the draft didn't quite go as we thought it would. But I got an opportunity to come to Houston and an opportunity to make the Texans practice roster. But while I'm going through OTAs, we go to Southern California and win 2 ESPYs. And so that was kind of like that whirlwind from January 1, basically through, chasing my dream and being on an NFL football team. Those kind of 8 months were just quite amazing. Some of the coolest times, meeting some of the most interesting people, giving a speech at the ESPYs and having Peyton Manning come up and say, that was a really good speech and you guys had a great game, in the green room. Danica Patrick, same thing. I mean, it was pretty cool, man. And then hung out with Chris Berman for at the after party. Him and Justin Verlander hung out with them for about chopped it up with some interesting people, man. It was a lot of fun.
Was there any disappointment that you didn't get drafted in the 2007 draft, or did it not matter because you ended up signing with Houston?
No, there was. I was so, kind of how these draft boards go, and there's a lot of speculation, a lot of pundits who say, we think this guy's going to go kind of from this range to this range. And for me, it was, I had heard as early as third round, as late as fifth or sixth, but kind of in those mid rounds. And then day one ends, third round ends, and they're talking about the best players that are still available. And Chris Berman actually mentions my name and says, "Hey, look for this guy to come off the board really early tomorrow." But I had an expectation of probably being in that fourth, fifth round range. And so did my agents, but there was always this underlying, hey, you never know. But I definitely wasn't a first round guy. But those mid rounds were definitely plausible, and to see my name continue to stay at the top as the guys are getting selected kind of around me. I had a lot of questions as to why. But you take that as kind of a motivator. And then there's also kind of a positive spin on that. Like, you're a sixth or seventh round guy, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to make a squad either. It's like you still got to go out and perform in fall camp, and you still need to be a dude that the team likes, and all that stuff that, all the physical and political stuff that go into the NFL game. You still need to be aware of those things and still perform, regardless of draft status outside of, really first to third. So I did have an opportunity, and on the positive side, like I mentioned, you get to choose the place that you go as a free agent. So I think the number was like 11 or 12 teams call me and say, "Hey, we'd like you to come to camp with us." And Houston had brought me down prior to the draft, so I got to know their coaches quite a bit better. Mike Sherman and Gary Kubiak and Kyle Shanahan all I felt very positive about all three of them, and we started off on the right foot. Felt like we started off with a good relationship, and the offense that they were running was West Coast offense, kind of an open system. West Coast is what we ran with Boise State. One safety, two safety reads, and it fit who I was as a quarterback as well, with some play action stuff, some half boot, some rollout, spread out stuff. So it was a good choice. I wish throughout the process I'd have made a few different decisions. I got released week 3 when Andre Johnson got hurt. Then to make practice roster space and shift some guys around. Then week 6 I got a call to come back, and I'd felt like things didn't kind of go the way that they should have, and so I decided not to come back and pursue workouts with other teams. And then I ended up in Pittsburgh in 2008. But I think the best fit for me would have been to stay with the Texans and with those coaches. But hindsight's always 2020. I thank God every day that I don't have those ringings or those dings going on in my head. I know there were plenty of opportunity to have that happen, but my health is there. I'm very fortunate to be in the place that I am today and able to pay forward my learnings and experience to my son and daughter. And all is good. God is great, man.
How do you stay positive though when you're in your early 20s? When you are hungry to make it to the next level, how do you navigate the not getting drafted, then you get signed, then you get released, then you get signed again? Like, how do you balance all that, but while taking the time to be disappointed, but then shutting that door and then being positive and getting back to work?
So something for me kind of along the way, and this was similar for a lot of the guys that ended up at Boise State, and you hear it a lot with kind of underdog schools, all that, those guys, overachievers, they got a chip on their shoulder. Or you hear it, that same scenario paraphrased or rephrased when you're talking about the greats. You talk about, this special that Netflix has now on Michael Jordan that, ran about the Bulls teams. Well, Jordan would make stories up in his head to give him a little extra motivator to come out. Just as a competitor, you just find a way for something else to create that propulsion, that extra motivator, or that internal drive, that fire. Those are all things that you hear people talk about, that you find a way to ignite it. And that was another, well, let me show you. The rest of the league didn't draft me. Texans didn't even draft me. I'm gonna come out. I'm gonna show you why you should have. So I use that kind of as a starter.
I like that a lot. And here's the thing: this is just my personal belief, and you tell me what you think. It's, if you leave everything out on the table and you do everything that you can, whether it's in the business world, playing a sport, or in any facet of life, then I believe I can walk away with no questions asked if you dump everything out there, because you gave it everything you got. And I think a hockey coach of mine used to say, like, sometimes the cards don't fall in your favor. And that used to tick me off, because I've looked at it through that lens. And of course, as I got older, I'm like, you know what? If I just work hard every single day and maybe it doesn't work out, I gave it everything I got. And what more can you ask for?
I think the more experience someone has and the more wisdom that they accumulate through life, the better understanding of self that's easier, more easily accepted. Like, I gave it everything. I'm good how I feel, or I'm good with the result because I know I gave it everything. For me, at an early age, like, screw it. I could have still won that. I should have found a way to win it, even though I know I gave it everything, but I didn't win it or didn't come out with the result that I wanted. It still like pulled at me. But later in life, for sure. And I think that has to do a lot with, how you prepare for things. Our kind of motto at Boise State was perfect practice prepares you for perfect performance. So for the 5 Ps, right? We'd have perfect practice for Thursdays where we wouldn't go forward unless that play was executed to 100%. So I had some Thursdays, Collin, where we only repeated like one play. Like, that's how stinking. And we're throwing the ball 50 yards down the field in the air. We're running like really crazy gadget plays, really intricate designs where the offensive line has to pick up different blitzes. And we repeat like one play on a Thursday. Like, we were dialed, man. That team, so many levels, that team was so good. But I think it has to do, with that preparation. That's a big part of it, because you could go out and like battle in a game and compete your ass off, but if you didn't prepare the way that you should have, it doesn't matter how hard you competed, you still left something, that you could have done better there. So I think with wisdom and understanding and or the right coaching helps you to pull all of it in, and then having enough experience and enough defeats and learning experiences, you, in knowing yourself, as we all, really start to do later in life, accepting those things becomes a little easier.
Knowing yourself is key, which is why I was talking to a friend the other day and I said, I'm 30 now. And I was like, I wish I could take 30-year-old Collin, jump back to when I was 19 years old and have all that wisdom and life experience, because I wouldn't have made all the stupid decisions that I made. But of course, that's not how life works, but you're right. Over time, you accumulate experiences and it gives you a new lens to look back on previous ones with.
But would you have that same mindset now if you didn't experience those things when you were 19 or 20? That's that kind of catch 22. Who you are today because you went through those. So I think there's some gratitude in there that I know that I've experienced, because I've I've made 10 times as many stupid decisions as you, my friend.
Hey man, you're right. You want to know, it all comes down to gratitude. I think gratitude is so important. There's a little in Santa Monica when I'm driving to the beach, there's actually a wall painted, and it's every single day that I happen to be down or feeling a little low. As soon as I look up, it's like boom, it's like it's right in front of me. It just says gratitude in giant letters. I'm like, that's what it's all about.
Great reminder, man.
Fantastic reminder. Well, listen, I don't want to take up too much of your time, dude. Obviously the Texans, the Steelers, you went up to Canada, spent some time in Canada in the CFLA. I got to ask you, like, at what point, Jared, did you decide to pivot away from football? Was it something that happened, or was it just something, internally where you were ready to move on?
Well, the politics of professional sports kind of got to me a little bit. And my children were coming. My daughter was going to be born. I'd gotten released very late from Edmonton. My final season there, I'd played in like 16 of 18 games. Excuse me, and started 2 of them, won both starts. And that was week 16 and 17, won both those starts. We had to win the last 3 to make the playoffs. And Ricky Ray, who was highly considered the number 1 quarterback in the league, number 1 or number 2, highest paid guy in the league, was who I was behind. And back week 18, played Saskatchewan at Saskatchewan, who I beat week 16 at home. And we handled them pretty well. And I played pretty well. And week 18, we go there, have a rough time, lose. And I remember talking to some of actually Ryan Dinwiddie was Saskatchewan's backup quarterback, who was in front of me for 3 years at Boise State, who's now the head coach for the Toronto Argonauts. And I remember Ryan saying, "Hey man, we were pretty happy that Ricky ended up starting because we didn't know how to defend you." And hearing that and the stuff that I had experienced previously, like, not always the best guys playing. And our locker room was split 50-50, with half of the guys really wanting me to be the guy, and half, were still kind of, Ricky advocates, which rightfully so. Great quarterback. He's going to go down in history as, either 1, 2, or 3 in all their passing records in the Canadian Football League. And I got released like 2 days before camp in 2011. And my daughter was going to be born in October. I could have chased it and landed with another team, but I was at a place to where I was like, hey, I chased my dream. Ultimately, I wanted to go to Canada to get back to the NFL, and that road seems even longer now. So I just made everybody's got to hang them up at one point. Took the next steps, and very fortunate to have made the decision when I did. I believe the pieces of the puzzle that were sitting there that were waiting for me to find, finally, came together, which has really led to the rest of my life.
It's a really great perspective to have. And today you're the senior director of sales, oil and gas, and EQI in Houston, Texas. How'd you get involved in that particular field once you left football? Was it a long and winding road, or did you kind of have an idea of what you wanted to get into post football?
So football got me into the oil and gas industry. So I actually started the week or 2 after I got released. I started a business called Jared Zabransky Quarterback Development. And so I was doing quarterback development for youth athletes, youth quarterbacks, and then speed and quickness training. And I accumulated about a dozen clients pretty quickly. The paper here in the Woodlands did a write-up on me, and former Houston Texans quarterback is running, quarterback speed and quickness camps and blah, blah, blah. And I get reached out to by a guy named Bobby Bryan, who says, hey, gives me this spiel. I'm a youth football coach in Cyprus, and my son's on the team. And I wasn't supposed to coach, but we had too many players in the league. So he asked me to coach. Would you come out and help us? I know you're, training young football player. So I get out there, and he's got like 6 coaches helping him, and I'm helping him with his quarterback, helping him with his offense. I mean, this is the bad news bears of little ball. These were 9 and 10s, and they couldn't take a snap, Collin. That they so we got them taking snaps, we got them handing the ball off right, over the span of 4 or 5 practices, and he starts asking me about. He asked me, "Hey, do you want to pitch the parents?" And I was like, "You know what? My client base is really good right now. Really like doing a group pitch." But he asked me a couple times. And I'm like, "It's the same answer, right?" And what are you getting at? He said, "Well, I've got a position." He said, "I'm the executive vice president of National of Arco. We're bringing people in. This is 2011. Huge manufacturer, largest manufacturer of oilfield equipment in the world. And they're here in Houston, Texas. Big. This is their corporate headquarters." And he asked me if I'd be interested in taking a position. I said, "Bobby, I don't even know what the weight of the oil is in the car, let alone like what the." He's like, "Oh, you'll learn." So I took a job and approached it like I was learning a playbook, and got into all of the product files. Learned as much as I could about the industry and the nuances and the jargon, and had some really early successes. And a couple of companies later, and a decade later, actually a decade 2 days ago of being in the industry. Decade later, with a great company that's corporately headquartered out of Spring Lake, Michigan, but I run our Houston group here, and the oil and gas division.
Here's the thing, Jared. If you can execute a play like the Statue of Liberty play the way that you did to win that game, as well as remember an entire playbook over the course of, playing high school, college, and in the pros, I'm a firm believer you could do anything.
It definitely translated the way that I remember stuff, and the way that I train my brain to remember like scenarios. Like we had, play calls in college were different than the NFL, but they're very similar offensive systems. So I would correlate, hey, this is like this, but it's called this. And how do I remember what those different wordage is? I would tie it to another fragment of words that I remembered. And I was able to pick up on our playbook here, West Coast offense, pretty quick here in Houston. And I just kind of take that into, that was something Chris Peterson instilled in me and in our quarterbacks. The importance of taking notes, the importance of really getting in and grinding and honing your mental capacity. And he had a master's in psychology, so he knew what nuances and knew what levers and strings to pull with my craziness. So it was an interesting 5 years with him. Learned a lot looking back at it, like, oh, that's why he did that. That stinking guy. But it's definitely helped down the road. So it was kind of an interesting trek to get to here. I've had a couple different businesses of my own, and I feel very fortunate as I'm approaching 38 here to have the experiences that I've had. Got 2 wonderful kids, Savannah and Rowan Zabransky. Savannah just turned 10 and Rowan's 8. And they go to school here in the Woodlands. My fiance, Vanessa Ferguson, we're coming up on a year being together, and working towards plans for the future. And it's feel pretty blessed, man.
Hey, congrats on obviously the 2 kids and of course the engagement. And you're also a soccer coach. We can't forget that. We were talking about, remember that this is how we learn how to be a good soccer coach. You just play FIFA, right?
Yeah, that was the initial rules that I remember learning was playing FIFA in college. I learned what offsides was and a couple different things. But yeah, I coached my daughter's soccer team for a few years, and then moved on from that quickly when figured out they deserved a better coach to learn from.
Then you brought in Chris Peterson.
That's right. That's right.
Jared, listen, I appreciate you taking the time and sharing your story. Again, this is just it's always great to chat with former athletes and get the perspective and the knowledge and just hearing your story from the small town of Hermiston to now in Houston, Texas. And I know that a lot of your story and a lot of the knowledge that you dropped will resonate. So thank you for taking the time.
Appreciate you having me on, Collin.